climate that social enterprises are kind of made for, where there's a need to do real work experience, real job training in real time with real people. I think the demand's going to be even greater. The issue, I think, is you would be well across all of the additional barriers and expanded and deeper barriers that are now going to be there for young people. So people who are kind of at the end of the queue and now at the end of an even bigger queue, of course, for lining up for jobs. And as you would know, disproportionately affected by the impact of coronavirus. So, they're the ones who had the most insecure jobs to start with, if they had any. They were on the lowest incomes, often had the lowest education. So all of that compounds. I think that there will be a shift. I think there is a bit of a shift in the way your local government, state government, hopefully federal government, but people are thinking about the values generally and what matters. I think the pandemic has revealed some great fissures and some great cracks and some great issues in equities. And I'm hoping that we don't bounce back. I hope we bounce forward into a different reality where people are willing to be more mindful and willing to pay for the externalities, like pollution and like paying for water and paying for things that actually come at a cost. And similarly, paying for fair employment and paying for fair opportunities and inclusion for young people. So it feels like there'll be a shift and the time will be right, but it feels economically like there'll be a greater demand. And so I'll start with the belonging, because that was sometimes you have realizations and then you realize you knew it all along. It just didn't place the right importance on it. So belonging is one of those sort of epiphanies that we knew all along, but just didn't amplify, didn't have at the right volume. And so when we started, we were all about accommodation and housing and jobs and all of the kind of structural things that young people need to be able to get and keep a job. And they're important. If you want to get and keep a job, you need those things. You need to have somewhere safe and stable to sleep. You need to be stable enough in yourself and have perhaps counselling support or drug or alcohol support, whatever it is. And similarly with the job skills and the job opportunities. Essentially, we get the trainees to give us their report card on us at the end of each program. And when I went back through 10 years, well, actually it wasn't that, it was probably about 6 years worth at the time of those notes and interviews that I'd done as a group and individually, what I always do is take down their words, their quotes. And then we get the measurements and then we look at the outcomes, and the standard outcome is, employment or further training and education at 6 months, because that's what our employment service providers want us to report on, and that's kind of the government reporting kind of metric. But when you listen in between that, when you go to the words of the young people, what was there in black and white over and over and over, hundreds, like thousands of quotes, was, "This place makes me feel safe. This is the first time that people remembered my name. So we don't want to make people feel out of place. Let's build this extra way in for people." And after about day 3 in the training, what happens is the young people start to deliberately come through the cafe. They loiter down there for 10 or so minutes until you have to nudge them out of the way because they're impeding all the traffic. They come up through the office. They'll high five or say hello to anyone who stops and talks to them. And our staff go through a really rigorous induction where we hammer home how important this sense of connection and respect and belonging is, not just for the trainees, but for staff and volunteers as well. And so they choose to come through what we had assumed would be a difficult or a challenging or a place where they wouldn't feel that they identified with, but they walk through like they own the joint. And they feel fantastic because, like I said, by the time they get to the training room, there's at least minimum of 6 people will have said hello and used their names. So over and over and over, this thing around belonging came through. So what I did was I went back and changed our theory of change. We changed our mission statement around work with young people, and it changed from just being around, getting work, and having a safe place to live. And now we talk about, our goal is for young people to thrive and to feel they belong and to have a healthy sense of self first and then work and home. So we still have those elements. So if you go back to the pathway, the stepping stones, they're critical. You can't have a job unless you've got skills and you're ready and perhaps a qualification. But it's necessary but not sufficient. And the stuff that glues it together, we found, is the connection and the belonging. The way we're approaching scaling is we're impatient. We think the barriers and the issues are terrible. We think they're tragic and they shouldn't be there, and we shouldn't wait around for another 10 years to build another street to do it again, to be able to work with 50 young people a year, because frankly, that's barely scratching the tip of the iceberg of people's needs. But we feel like one of the ways we can get some scale in there is to take the equivalent of my team, like grow my team of support, and take what we've learned over the last 10 years and embed that in another group, or embed that in a large employer kind of corporate group, or embed that in the Moving Feast network, and say, all right, so let us be the kind of seconded team that comes and sits in, works with you, capability build. So maybe you have staff members who work alongside us, and then we're really happy, almost apprenticeship style, to train them up, give them all the experience that we've learned, so that you've then got that capability, and we can move on. Often when people talk about youth and social enterprise, sometimes they make an assumption that a way forward is to build individual businesses or micro businesses for young people to run themselves. So I didn't pick that up. I don't think that's what you're asking me, but that's often a question, is, should we be teaching young people how to run their own enterprises so they can then, employ themselves essentially. And I think that's an amazing model for young people who have the capability to do that. And I would never rule it out from our cohort, but there's been about 3 over the 10 years who have had an interest and a passion and the ability to go and do that, because generally you have the stuffing knocked out of you by the time you come to a place like STREAT. So you've challenged with housing, you're challenged with family relationships, you might have left school very early, and that doesn't mean that you're not going to be really bright and really good at business. Excuse me, but often what we find, going back to that belonging, is that young people don't want to work by themselves. What they actually crave is to work in a stable group of people who are their age or a little bit older, who give a damn and who are nice people and don't treat them badly. So that sense of wanting to do real work with real people and be part of a team is really important. So I'm all for those programs, like Foundation for Young Australians and some others do some fantastic, young enterprise or young entrepreneur type programs. But it's relatively rare that overlaps with our cohort. So we haven't pursued that as a pathway, but I'm always in the sidelines cheering for those types of programs. It's just often they don't meet the needs for our young people.